right, good morning, everybody. Kind of some important stuff to talk about today. So, information that you'll need to know as you start wrapping up the class, which ends in a few days here. So you'll want to make sure you're hitting that stuff. And as I mentioned last time, technically, I didn't realize this at the beginning of the semester. A few of the due dates I have posted are actually after the end of the semester. They changed the way the late start classes end this year. Usually they end right before finals, but this time they ended a little bit earlier than the end of finals. So some of my due dates are technically after the class is supposed to be finished, but I feel like it would cause a problem if I try to shorten those due dates. But what that means is there's no time for extensions. So if you don't get your stuff in by the due date listed, I cannot extend. There's just no way I can extend anything beyond that. So please make sure that you get all of your stuff in on time. With that said, let's take a look at what that means. Oops, where's my Canvas page? Here it is. A few things here at the bottom, right, where this is the right one, 15-week. Today's Wednesday, right? Yeah. So something new has shown up, so I just want to point it out so no one misses it. Down here at the bottom, you have another thing that's due December 7th. Now, it says 3 points. That's because this is a departmental quiz that we all are giving our stats classes. So the quiz itself is worth 3 points, but as far as how that quiz is graded, but I'm weighting it much larger. So the points for this quiz are much more than 3 points. So don't look at it and go, 3 points, what's that worth? This is probably going to be worth about 30 points on your quiz, which works out to, I'd have to sit down and look at exactly how many points there are for the project, but that works out to about 15%. You might go, 15%'s not very high. That's a grade and a half. Right? So that could be the difference between a high C and a low A, right? So 15% makes a huge difference. So just be aware of that. This it actually should say CSLO. The person who made this had a typo. CLSO doesn't make any sense. So what's going on here is we are up for accreditation review next year as a college. So what happens is this group comes in and they look at all sorts of stuff at our school that we've been working on and what we've been doing. And then, if all goes well, they say, great, you're still accredited. See you in 3 years or 4 years, whatever it is. So the school kind of has this massive, massive project going around and preparing for that, right? One of the things we have to do are these things called SLOs, student learning outcomes, and we have to have quizzes specifically designed to test student learning outcomes in classes, and then we have to report those percentages to the people coming to do accreditation. So this is actually mandated by the school. I have to give this quiz. This is not even, I don't even have a choice. I have a few choices in like how I score it, but basically this quiz is being given in every single stats class, okay? Because we have to show, when they come for accreditation, we have to show this. So please take this seriously. Like, accreditation is a big deal to you for a couple of reasons. Well, for one thing, getting points for the project is big because generally, like I talked about earlier, these discussion boards for the project, those are usually pretty easy to pick up your points. Just do an honest effort, and I usually give full credit. The project itself that you turn in gets graded a little bit harder. So if you can pick up some additional 30 points on this quiz, bam, that's just going to pad your grade a little bit more, right? So that if you do have some missteps in your project and your grade's a little lower than you'd like, you have more points that you've already done between the discussions, the project discussions, and this quiz, pull your grade back up. So that quiz score is going to help you in this class, so take it seriously for that reason. Also, the school and those of us who work at the school obviously want the school to be the best that it can be, and that includes being accredited, right? A lot of bad things happen when your school is not accredited, and we don't want that. And you as students want the school to be accredited for a couple of reasons. One, if you're going to take classes at a school, you want it to be respected as a good school, right? Which you sort of lose that when you lose accreditation. Also, if we lose accreditation, then one of the things that happens is other schools that might be taking your classes as transfer start rethinking if they want to take those classes as transfer, because they're like, well, if Ventura College lost their accreditation, maybe they're not doing such a good job over there, right? And obviously you want your classes that you take at Ventura College to transfer. So it's really in everybody's best interest that the school get accredited again. So part of that, our little part that we can do, is I have to give this quiz and you have to take it. So just what I'm saying is take it seriously. Don't just blast through it and you're like looking at it, oh, 3 points, no big deal. I don't even care if I get a 0. It isn't 3 points. It's going to be more like 30 points towards your final project, which again is in the neighborhood of 15%. That's pretty significant. And then also, if you take it seriously and do well on it, it will help maintain the school in some small way. It will help us maintain our accreditation for next year and the next 3 years, so that we're all considered a professional learning environment. Okay, so make sure you do that. I just opened it. Should be available to you. Actually, what we're doing today is I'm going to go over I'm going to remind you. We're going to review the things you're going to need to know for that quiz, right? So don't take it just yet. But what would be great is as soon as you watch this video, today's class meeting where I talk about this stuff, maybe review it, answer any questions you have, and then go take the quiz and hopefully get a good grade on it, which is going to help your project grade. It's also going to help the school remain accredited, right? Which is good. So you can see you've got these due dates down at the bottom. You've got your hypothesis test discussion coming up. You've got the actual completed project that you need to complete. And then you've got this CSLO quiz that we need to complete. Sorry, I'm still getting over my cold here. I'm going to cough occasionally. Okay, so make sure you get those 3 things. And just, again, I can't say this enough times, there literally is no time for me to extend any of these dates. So if you can't get stuff done by these dates, I cannot extend it. So please make sure you get this stuff done by those due dates. Because I have to start putting grades together, and there's pressure on us to get grades turned in, right? So let's see. We do not have a specific final exam time in this class. Some students may not be aware of that. So let's go over to the calendar, because some of you take other classes, and I can just sort of give you the overview of how this works. So if you're anywhere on the Ventura College webpage, up at the top, there's a link for academic calendar. Click that, and you get 2 very important calendars. One is the academic instructional calendar. Okay, and you can see here we are for fall 2021. And you've got this purple week down there. That's finals week. Generally in a class, at the end, if it's a full-length class, 18 weeks, 18 weeks, you'll have a final here in this purple zone. The late start classes also end early. This semester they're ending especially early, which kind of took me by surprise. So you don't have a final exam during finals week, and your project is not due during finals week. Like my 18 weeks stats class, their project is due at their final exam time. Okay, you all have to do it a little bit earlier because the course ends earlier. Technically, the course ends on the 3rd, but I messed up and had stuff due on the 7th. So you can still turn it in till the 7th. And then make sure you get all that stuff in. So in this class, this class ends on the 7th. There's nothing that can be done after the 7th. In your other classes, you may have stuff going on in this purple week right here. That's finals. But if you took a shortened class, it won't have stuff going on during finals. Okay, so that's just kind of how that works and how this class works. And then if you want to know what your final exam schedule is, they publish this. They used to publish it before the semester started. Now they do it about halfway through the semester, which is tricky because they tell us we're required to put the final exam time in our syllabus, but then they don't release the final exam times until halfway through the semester, so I can't really have it in my syllabus then. But anyways, this is where you find the final exam schedule. So you don't have one for this class because we don't have a final exam in this class. But if you look up your other classes, you can figure out when they are. So the columns are days, the rows or times, and you just find where your class starts. So if you have other classes, you could just look up on here. I know sometimes students get confused about when the final is and they don't know what to do, but like the information is publicly available to you. It's posted on the website. So you can get all that kind of stuff. But we don't have to worry about a final exam for this class because the course ends before that. Okay, so let me double check. We had stuff was due yesterday. We had some stuff due yesterday. Yeah, so all you have left is finishing up this last chapter and your project, right? So that's today. We'll be talking largely about this quiz, and then and then we're kind of done. We don't even meet next Monday because the class ends on the 3rd, right? I accidentally set it up so you can turn stuff in till Tuesday, but we don't even have a class on Monday. There's no meeting because the class ends on the 3rd, is what the dates say if you look it up. So really, anything you want to talk to me about, you should talk to me about now, or come to office hours. I can still meet with you in office hours. I have office hours tomorrow. I have office hours on Monday. I have office hours on Tuesday. You can still come to those. And if you need to, I might be able to set up a Zoom meeting with you at a specific time, but I can't guarantee that I'll be able to do that, right? If you say, oh, I can't make it to your office hours, but I'd like to talk to you, I might be able to set up a Zoom meeting. The longer you wait, the less likely it is that I'll be able to set something up. But so that's a possibility. So make sure you're doing those last things, and then I'm gonna, once December 7th hits, in fact, even before that, if people are turning in their stuff ahead of time, I'll be grading stuff ahead of time and getting ready to submit those final grades. Because, from each class, I have potentially, I won't get this many from each class, but potentially 40 videos to watch. That takes me, this semester, 3 classes, that might take me close to a week to watch all those videos if you think about it, plus the fact that I still have regular classes to teach and other duties. So I'm going to try to start watching those videos as soon as they get turned in. Okay, those of you who turn your project in by the 3rd will get an extra 10% on your project. So don't turn in a bad or a subpar project because you're trying to chase that 10%. Because if you turn in a bad project and you get 50% on your project, and then you get the extra bonus of turning it in early, that still puts you at a 60% on your project. That's not good, right? So like I say, don't chase that 10% if you're not ready. But if you're ready, turn it in. If it's turned in before the 4th, so if it's turned in by December 3rd at 11:59, I'll give you an extra 10% on that project part. But again, make sure it's good quality project that you're doing. Okay, things you need to know for this quiz, right? I'm going to do basically a quick review of the quiz so that you kind of remember. It's stuff you should know how to do, but you know how it is when you haven't looked at math or statistics, a certain part of it for a few months, you start to forget it, right? So pretty basic. You need to know how to calculate a mean and a median. You can use StatCrunch to do it. That's perfectly fine. But you want to remember some questions like, when is the mean the better measure of center, and when is the median the better measure of center? When do we know? Sorry, I'm still congested, and my sinuses are all congested still. How do I know when I should use the mean and when I should use the median? So sometimes the mean and median, they match up really well. Sometimes there's some space in between. So let's just make up a problem here, and we'll go through it. We'll talk about it, and we'll talk about the two things. Let's see. So let's go here. So let's go. Okay, so I just made up this example. Let's say that this is the number of duties that you are responsible for at your job. And this is your pay, what do they call it? Pay level. So, some places you have a pay level. So certain parts of the military are like this. You're classified as a certain pay grade, and then you can move up. But at any given time, you know what your benefits and your pay is because you're at a level whatever. I forget what they call it. Is it like, do they use a P? It's like P18 or P19 or something like that. Anyway, so we've got pay level. So let's just say we have a scenario here where we've looked at some employees, and we've kept track of how many duties they have to do at work. How many things are they responsible for at work, and then what pay level they ended up in, right? So pretty straightforward. This is the number of duties you have to do at work. Here's your pay level. And it's reasonable to think that the number of duties you're responsible for at work might affect your pay grade. People who are responsible for more stuff might make more money than people who are responsible for less things. This is a huge oversimplification because somebody with 2 major duties might be doing more work than somebody with 4 minor duties, but you get the point of the problem, right? And of course, there's other things that might affect some of this, seniority and different kind of stuff that you've had at your work. But here's the scenario, right? So let's take a look at, let's take a summary stat of the number of duties, hit compute, and we can see here, we get a mean of 4.25 and a median of 4. Okay, so in this case, our mean and median are pretty close together, meaning they're both probably reasonable measures of center in this situation. But remember, sometimes we get a big difference between our mean and our median. I did an example in class, I think earlier in the semester, where we talked about home prices. When you're looking at homes and you're looking at where you might want to buy a home, the information is almost never given in mean price for the neighborhood. It's almost always median price. Okay, and that's because you can get a big range in home prices, and you can definitely get outliers. There are neighborhoods where you have a bunch of homes that are about the same price, and then one home that's like worth way more, right? There's like in my neighborhood, there's like 3 homes that are massive. They're owned by people those people must have a lot of money, but they are huge homes. They have views. They're kind of off where they have a big chunk of land for themselves, like many acres for growing avocados or whatever they do. Those homes are worth like millions and millions of dollars, right? Whereas the rest of the homes in the neighborhood, there's a range, but they're not worth like many multi-millions of dollars, right? Like some of these homes are. Well, if you took the mean, those really expensive homes are going to pull that mean one direction, because remember, for the mean, every single data value ends up in the calculation of the mean. What happens then? So that's sort of a strength and a weakness, because you kind of go, well, wouldn't you want to take into account every single value? You might, but what happens then is if you take into account an outlier, it can skew your data a lot. So one outlier can pull that mean one direction enough that it's not really a good measure of any of your data anymore. Okay, one expensive home in a neighborhood can pull that mean value up to where it's not really, doesn't really represent the cheaper homes, and it doesn't really represent the more expensive home. Not really a good measure of center in that way. That's why with homes they often use the median. Okay, so sorry, I'm getting distracted by that. Just trying to breathe here. So when you don't have outliers, you generally expect the mean and the median to be roughly close to each other. But once you have an outlier pulling that mean one direction, that outlier is not really going to pull the median very much, if at all. But the mean will start getting pulled one direction. So that's why where you start seeing bigger differences between the mean and the median. And then in those cases, a lot of times you go with the median. In other cases, you might go with the mean, but not usually if there's outliers. If there's outliers, we usually go with the median, okay? So you're going to have a couple problems on the quiz where you have to calculate a mean and you have to calculate a median, Well, hopefully for all of you, that sounds silly because hopefully you've been doing this on StatCrunch for a long time where I'll just put it in StatCrunch. Here's my mean, here's my median, there's my values, good to go. But then you're also going to have a question on the quiz where you have to justify which one is the better one to use, the mean or the median, and why it is the better one to use in that particular problem. Okay? So it kind of just, you have to understand the concepts that I was just talking about where, sometimes the mean is better, sometimes the median is better, those kind of situations. So that's part of the quiz right there. Okay, the other part of the quiz involves something that you're going to have to do for your project anyways, so that's great, right? If you've learned how to do it for the project, you'll be good to go for this part of the quiz. And if you do it right, it'll get you a lot of points on the project. It also gets you a bunch of points on the quiz, which again counts towards your project, right? So this one question, this one question that's on the quiz, or two questions, whatever it is, about correlation could really make a big difference overall in your project grade, because it's going to help you on the quiz, which counts towards the project. It's also going to help you when you're making your project, which obviously counts towards your project. Okay, so remember when we make a scatter plot? Now, here's one thing I see, and I bring it up in class, and I don't know why there's this tendency to not do it. I always say it in class, here's what you should do, and then when I watch people's videos, they don't do it, okay? When you give me a scatter plot, graph the linear regression with it. I don't know why people are giving me a scatter plot and talking about linear regression and they didn't graph the linear regression. It doesn't make any sense to me why you would do that, and I'm left confused, and the only thing I can think of when I'm grading is, they don't know how to do it. Well, and since, remember, that's the main thing that I'm judging in these statistics projects is what have you learned, then if I come to the conclusion they don't know how to do that, then obviously points get taken off, right? So I want to make a scatter plot here. I want to run a linear regression, and then I want to talk about it. That's what you're going to do, partially on the quiz, but that's what I need to see on the project. So what do? You go to stat, you go down to regression, simple linear. You pick your variables, which in my case, I want X to be number of duties, Y to be the pay level. Now for your project, come down here and make sure you fill in these labels with units. So you just go in here and you would write this in. What does your x-axis represent? Give me the units. So if it's time, does that mean hours, days, minutes, seconds, years, decades? Like, what are we talking about? Put that information in here. Y-axis, put that information in here. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about dollars in a bank account, or what is it that we're dealing with, right? So tell me what it is. Tell me the unit that you're using. Is it dollars? Is it yen? Is it francs? Like, what is it that we're measuring? Put that in here. And then a title, which just kind of brings both together in some kind of a way, right? It takes, 10 seconds to fill in these labels. But I will tell you, if you don't fill in your labels for stuff like this, it's like someone put a spotlight on it. Like, oh, they didn't even label it. They didn't put very much effort into this, did they? So absolutely put your labels in there. Your graphics will get marked down significantly if some of them are unlabeled. So you just fill this in. And then a thing that can be helpful, here's the prediction of Y. Right? So remember, one of the reasons we come up with a linear regression is so that we can make prediction about unknown values. So we'll come back to that in a minute, but it's important that you know how to do that, right? It's possible that'll show up on the quiz. You might not end up making a prediction for the project, but you might end up doing it for the quiz. So make sure you know how to do that. So I'll talk about it in a moment. So let's compute. Now I want to show you a couple things. First of all, notice it says 1 of 2 up here and you have an arrow. This is just page 1. You have 2 pages, and guess what's on the second page? Oh, good news. There's our scatter plot with the linear regression included. So I keep telling students, make sure the linear regression is in your scatter plot, and yet I would say at least half the graphs, the scatter plots that I see in the projects don't have a linear regression on it. And then again, I have to assume it's because you don't know how to do it. So we just kind of went through it. Remember, you go to stat, regression, simple linear, pick your variables, come down, make your labels, and hit compute. So it's not a very complicated thing. If you forget that, just look it up. Literally, like when I forget this, because I forget StatCrunch, like where the stuff is located, I forget it all the time. In like 3 months, when I'm teaching regression again in the spring, I'm going to forget probably where it's located, and I'm going to have to look it up. So I just Google, or I go into YouTube and search it in there, StatCrunch linear regression. And there's like there's going to be like a 90-second video where you just watch someone do it and you go, that's right, that's where it is. It's under stats and then regression. That's right. I forgot where it was, but now I remember. So it's pretty easy to find. Sometimes I'll have students, and I understand where they're coming from, where they're like, the software is so confusing and I don't know how to do stuff in it. But you can just Google it. Just Google StatCrunch and then whatever the name of the thing is that you're trying to figure out how to do. Okay. So you've got this graph, which you can save and then fit into your video, however you want to do that. And then look what they give us here. There's a bunch of information here. They're giving us our variables. The dependent variable is pay level. The independent variable is number of duties. And what's this? Oh, that is our linear regression. You go, it is? It looks like it's got words or something in it. That's kind of weird. But if we take a look at it, remember, as soon as it compiles here, where is it? Let me see. I got to shift this. You go, that doesn't look like an equation. Sure it is. This is one of our variables. Pay level is really a variable. Number of duties is really a variable. Okay, you might be used to using X's and Y's for your variables, but making your variable a word can be helpful because we're not going to mix it up. I'm not going to mix up which variable is my pay level and which one's my number of duties because they literally say the thing they're representing. But if you look at this form, it's literally just, it's almost y equals mx plus b. It's the statisticians like to do it a little different. Excuse me. It's y equals b plus mx. So effectively, it's the same line, y equals mx plus b, but they a lot of times write it a little bit differently in statistics. So y is pay level, b is this 1.548, and m is this 0.788, and x is the number of duties. Okay, so it's literally y equals mx plus b from beginning algebra, and that you had to deal with so many times. So here's our slope, right? It's right on our x value, the m. That's our slope. You probably remember you probably remember from beginning algebra where your teacher would frequently refer to the slope as a rate of change. You should know how to interpret that rate of change. So what does this mean? Well, when I put in my number of duties, I multiply it by 0.788574143, do some stuff to it, and then I get my pay level. In other words, the way we interpret that rate of change is that for each increase of 1 in our number of duties, so each time the number of duties we have at work goes up by 1, we expect our pay level to go up by 0.788574143. Now, of course, it doesn't work that way, right? You're either a level 4 or you're a level 5 pay scale. But you know, this is this is like the mean. On average, we would expect that for each increase in duties, you're going up about 3/4 of a level. So certainly, if you got 2 new duties, you should have gone up at least 1 pay scale, right? You would hope. If not, you might go ask, is something going on here? But that's how you would interpret that. That's the rate of change. So what if we want to use this equation here to make a prediction about an unknown value. There's two ways we can do this. Okay, so one is we can make the prediction right here in StatCrunch. So see how there's no level, there's no, like, maybe we're the boss and we're trying to decide, ooh, for the first time, I'm about to give someone their 8th duty, but I don't know what pay scale they should be. So I want to predict, according to our model, what pay scale somebody with 8 duties at work should be. Should they still be on pay level 8, or should I move them to pay level 9? What's the appropriate thing to do? So let's do what we did a minute ago. I'm going to go to Stat, down to Regression, over to Simple Linear, select those variables again, and if you're, you should go down and make your labels. You can even change the color scheme a little bit. Oh, let's see. I haven't used the chess. Let's see what those look like. But we can make a prediction. So let's say I wanted to predict what it's going to be like when someone has 8 duties. So I put 8 in here for my predicted X value. So I want to know, what is the Y value when the X value is 8? So I hit compute. And notice that now in here, it gives me a few things more than it gave me before. If I scroll down, look, it gives me my predicted value. So it says, oh, you wanted to know about a predicted value of 8? Well, our predicted Y value is 7.85714. So me as the boss goes, okay, probably I'm going to put this person at pay scale 8 then. Now that we have the first person with 8 duties, it looks like they deserve to be at pay scale 8. So that's where I'm going to put them. Right, we make that prediction. You may have to do this on the quiz. I don't remember completely how the question is asked. Okay, so you can do it this way, but also we can do it directly over here by just plugging in 8. So I'll say, okay, pay level. Actually, I can do this even faster. Pay level equals this times, well, we're going to plug in for number of duties. We're going to plug in 8. So your pay level is just going to be, you get out your calculator and do 1.5485714 plus 0.7885714 times 8. Make sure you do the right order of operations. You have to do your multiplication first before your addition. But do that, and whatever number you get out actually should match this one right here, about 7.8571429. So you can do it by hand really easily. You can do it by using StatCrunch really easily. You can do it either way. You've got your R value, your correlation coefficient. You should definitely be using that in the project. Okay, when you show me your scatter plot for your regression, basically when you show me this thing, oh, that's the softer colors. Oh, I don't like that as much. It doesn't show up as well. In fact, I dislike it a lot. Let's change that. Let's see what that one looks like. Yeah, okay, that one looks good. So there's two things you should address. Much of the time, students only address one of these, and it's really incomplete if you only address one. So what you want to do, show me your graph, like when you're talking about your correlation and stuff, show me this. And then in this case, I think you can make the case, yeah, we visually can see that this line is representing this data pretty well. Our data gets increases as it goes to the right. So we see this overall behavior. And yeah, this line's going through there. It's a decent... It's a decent regression. Our data isn't clumped up real tight, but it's good enough. This regression is doing a decent job overall of representing the data. So we see visually that it looks like a good representation. And then we look at the R value and go, well, it's not a super strong correlation, but it's kind of up there where it's starting, remember your R value being close to 1 or -1 means you're getting a stronger correlation. The closer your R value is to 0, the weaker correlation you have. Well, this is a case where I'd say, yeah, there's kind of a decent correlation. It's not super strong, but it's not like super weak either. So on the project, please address both, right? Because if you only address one, then I go, okay, they did one of the two things. They're not going over it. Talk about the R value, interpret that for me, and then just look at the thing and go, yeah, like a visual inspection shows us it's a good graph. Or if it's not a good graph, show me the thing and go, because that's what I hear sometimes. The students go, yeah, but it wasn't a good regression, so I didn't want to show you that. No, show it and then say, oh, look, so here's what happens when we run the linear regression. And if you have one that looks bad, you can go, we can see it's not a very good fit. And then you would come over here, talk about the R value. And if your R value is like 0.45, you go, and also look at our R value is really low. So we don't think that there's really a usable correlation between these variables, right? You can make the conclusion either way, but you have to like give the information. You have to give the evidence. One is to look at your graph and explain it. The other is to discuss the R value, okay? So make sure you do both of those. So with that information, I think you should be good to go for the project part and then also the quiz part that's about correlation. You should be able to do both of those now, okay? I mean, you could previously, but I'm just reviewing it because we haven't done this stuff for a long time. So with that said, we have about 10 minutes left. If there's any questions, feel free to throw them in chat, and I will try to address them, right? There's not a lot of questions coming from this class really for most of the semester. So if you have a question, like now is the time to talk about it because your stuff's about to be due, basically. So throw the questions in there. I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, I'll just try to go back and kind of give the quick overview. Remember, the thing that you're turning in is a video, right? I just want to stress this because I don't like giving people zeros on their projects. You have to give me a video. Don't give me a PowerPoint. You can use a PowerPoint in your video. I have students do that all the time where they've created a PowerPoint or, Google version of PowerPoint, whatever you want. They've created the thing, and then they use screen capture software to capture that, and then they give a voiceover while they're doing the video. That's great. I think that's a great way to do it. You set up your slides, so you have what you want at any given time to talk about it. Your slides usually should not be a wall of text. They should be probably visuals. If you have a short thing you want to show, like a conclusion or something like that, fine. But it shouldn't be 100 words on a PowerPoint slide. That's just bad presentation skills. For presentations, people don't like to read. People don't like to read anyways. People basically don't read anything anymore. But they like looking at pictures. So, put up your visuals. Make sure your visuals are good. Make sure they're interesting. They're labeled, all that kind of stuff. And then you can have that stuff up while you're talking about it. But make sure it's labeled. Let's see. I just lost my train of thought. I was going... Oh, right. And so the thing you have to send me is a video, though. Don't send me the PowerPoint you use. That will get a 0. Send me your video of you discussing the PowerPoint, and I can see the PowerPoint while you're talking about it. That is a totally legitimate way of doing the video, right? And everyone's video is kind of different. It's actually kind of nice to see people kind of doing their own thing and being creative in their own way. As long as you get to the information. And again, what I really want to know is what did you learn this semester? That's what I'm going to grade you on, is your knowledge and your ability to put together some decent statistics for your project. Do not try to hide your mistakes, right? Well, the projects I watch where people come out and say, I did this part and I screwed it up and it's kind of too late for me to fix now, but here's what I did wrong and here's what I would do next time. You just showed me you learned something, right? That's what I'm looking for, is that you learned some things about statistics. Well, I see videos where I can tell people are trying to hide their mistakes. Don't do that. You would do that if this was, you were trying to make a presentation that was like at a statistics summit somewhere, or you're trying to get published in a journal, but that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to wrap up a statistics class. So really what I need to know is whether you learned anything or not. So don't be afraid of that. Also remember, if some of your questions didn't turn out well and you can't really use that data, feel free to use any questions from the survey. There's no ownership of these questions. Any question that you want to use, feel free to use it, okay? you're welcome to do that. Let's see. Make sure your homework's completed, of course. Wrap stuff up. You got your visuals. As far as the visuals, go back and work on them a little more. You're probably better at doing a lot of this stuff than you were on November 7th when you first turned in your project visuals. Hopefully you are, right? I mean, what does that mean if you aren't any better at it than you were back then? That you didn't really learn anything in the meantime? So it's natural. Sometimes people get offended where you're like, well, you're probably better now than you were back then. And they're like, what are you saying? Are you saying I didn't know it back then? Well, you had just learned it. So like, of course you should be better now than when you first learned it. You've had time to get used to it and understand it and let it all settle in and reuse it in later chapters. So yeah, you should be better with it. So go back, just see if you can improve those visuals a little bit, right? A lot of times students, when they're doing projects, they miss this idea of like little improvements. They'll go, is this worth doing? No, that's only going to make a small difference. Is this worth doing? No, that's only going to make a small difference. But the thing is, if you can make 10 differences and each one will make a 1% difference in your grade, that's the kind of thing where students are like, 1%, that's not really worth my time. But if you do 10 1% improvements, you just improved your project an entire letter grade, right? That's why a lot of times I don't understand if I'm talking to students and they're like, well, that's a small improvement. Okay, so go make 10 small improvements and you probably get a whole letter grade better. That's true in life too. All these little things that people miss, like they're like, that's not worth doing. The people who are beating you out for the promotion and getting hired for the job, they're not skipping those little things. They're doing those little things. That's why they're getting the job over you. And I don't mean you particularly. I just mean like people in general. The people who do those little things, they end up getting further. So, like I say, 10 little improvements. You go in, you find three graphs you can improve. You go back and you go, oh, I can do my correlation stuff a little bit better now. You go through, my hypothesis test, I understand better. You go redo a few things. All of a sudden, you're looking at a B instead of a C, right? I apologize about the coughing. This is getting ridiculous. And I'm still not seeing any questions, so yeah. So there's your project visuals. Yeah, for correlation, absolutely. Show me the scatter plot with the regression line on there. If the regression line is not on your scatter plot, I'm going to assume you don't know how to do it, and I'm going to wonder why in months and months of this class you didn't take the time to sit down and learn how to do that piece, especially since I've shown you, including today, how to do that. So I would highly encourage you to do that and then talk about it. Remember the thing, like basically the way to get an A or to have a chance of getting an A on your project, you need good conclusions. So your conclusion should not be the p-value was low, so we decided to reject the null. Like you can say that. I don't want you to be afraid of saying that, but don't think that's your conclusion. That is your technical conclusion. That is not your real world important conclusion, right? If you ever have to do statistics at your job, or if you're running your own business or something like that, and then you go to the other people working at your company and you tell them, you go in and say, okay, everyone, I finished up my statistics, and guess what? We're going to reject the null hypothesis. No one's going to know what you're talking about, right? What you have to do is put your conclusions in terms that people who have not been working with you can understand. So that would be like, some people are doing projects that about the number of units taken and the number of hours worked. So your conclusion may be to talk about how your hypothesis test shows that the number of students who are working less after the pandemic is above 80% or something like that, right? You have to put it in, you can have one conclusion that concludes the statistics using technical statistical terms, but then you also need to have the real world conclusion that shows you understand what you're talking about. Interpret the information in the language of the problem that you're looking at. Okay. So you can't really get an A without those good real world conclusions, right? Which is our test shows, that the number of people working fewer hours after COVID is above 80% or whatever. Whatever it is that your conclusion shows. So make sure you put it in that real world part. Projects that just do like surface level stuff where you're just reading to me the stuff that came out of StatCrunch, low grades. Those are like C's and D's probably, right? Depending on how much you just read the stuff coming out of StatCrunch, you might get a D or lower on the project because all you're really doing is reading StatCrunch, right? You saw some directions that say do these things on StatCrunch, you did it, and then you're just reading me the values of the confidence interval is from this to this. The hypothesis test had a p-value, so we rejected the null. That kind of stuff doesn't really show that you understand anything. So make sure that you're filling. You can give that stuff, that's fine, but you have to fill the rest in. Give me the information so that I know you know what you're talking about. When I teach this class on ground, one of the complaints I have is that students will memorize how to do a hypothesis test, which is your last chapter. And they'll sit there and they'll go into StatCrunch. They'll conduct a hypothesis test. They'll do it correctly, and they'll make the correct conclusion about whether they're going to reject the null or fail to reject the null. And they'll go, see, I know how to do a hypothesis test. And I'll go, good, you do know how to run a hypothesis test. What's your conclusion? What does it mean? What does it mean in the context of the problem? What does it mean that we rejected the null hypothesis? And very frequently, students will go, I don't know, but I memorized what buttons to push in StatCrunch, and I know to reject the null in this the particular situation. But the person has no idea what they did. They have no idea what it means. And it's not going to help you run your business if you don't know what statistics actually means. It's not going to help you do research. It's not going to help you at a company if you don't actually understand what any of this stuff is. So you have to fill in for me in your project those details that you know how to do that. Okay, I'm about to lose my voice with the coughing here. But we're out of time anyways. So anybody who wants to hop over to Zoom and ask me questions, let's see, what is today, Wednesday? So I actually have office hours now, but I always stick around after class anyways. So I will be around if you want to hop in there and ask me any questions about this project or how things are wrapping up for the end of this semester. Come into Zoom right now and talk to me. And we can I can help clear those things up for you so you can make sure you're doing the right thing, get a good grade on your project, and then you'll be done and hopefully never have to take stats again, right? So that's where we're at. So thanks everybody. Otherwise, this is technically the last class meeting that we have. So thanks everybody. Those of you, give yourself a pat on the back who stuck in there and are still working it out and still making your way through the class. Was you should be proud of yourself. So yeah, thanks everybody. Hop into Zoom if you